suppose I'll put a question back on you, which is, what are Arsenal good at the moment? That's what I was thinking yesterday, watching them lose against Chelsea. What is that team good at? They don't defend well. The shape's not particularly good. They're not good at stopping balls getting into the striker's feet. They don't close off channels defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like the old Arsenal teams, when I suppose the late Wenger teams that were a bit hapless defensively, but would create a lot of chances. They don't do that either. They don't entertain you. I don't know what this team's trying to be. When he first came in, I thought he was going to be a kind of Pep Guardiola prototype. I think that's what most people thought, that because he'd worked with Pep Guardiola, we'd see that kind of football, that would be the end game. But the more I listen and listen to him speak and watch his team, I don't think that is what he's trying to be. I almost see more of a David Moyes ambition in terms of the style of football. And I don't mean that as a negative thing. I mean that in the best sense of David Moyes teams, in terms of the good Everton teams and good West Ham teams, where, you have a side that tries to be tight and takes chances when they come, rather than a side that really dominates possession. And to your question on how long do you stick with him, I think we're now entering the stage where it's almost unprecedented for a big six club, as they would like to be known, to be sticking with such underperformance for what is now getting on to 2 years, with very few signs of palpable change. And a lot of the senior players, there's doubts about their future. I mean, even Xhaka this summer, who they've given a new contract to, looked like he was leaving for half the summer, and now he's signed a new long-term deal. I look at players like Hector Bellerin. What has happened to him? And just this stagnation that is happening with these senior players. And you could go on and on, but to extend that from what are Arsenal good at, what as a team, you then ask, what are Arsenal as a club good at? Are they good at buying players? Are they good at identifying talent? Are they good at shifting players that need to be sold? And at the moment, the answer to all these questions is no.
And this is the issue, I think, Art, here, in the fact that there can be all the attention on Mikel Arteta. It feels like we're replicating conversations we've had about other clubs over the last 2 years. But the head coach is just a cog in how a club is run. And therefore, this comes back to owners. It comes back to Edu, doesn't it, as head of recruitment? It comes back to, and we've discussed this before on the pod, they've had some very confusing hierarchical structures over the last 3 years of Arsenal. And probably it comes down to youth development as well. I don't know where. Start with recruitment and the hierarchical structure if you want, and then we'll come on to the youth side later.
Yeah, I think in terms of the recruitment, I think especially since Mikel Arteta came in, there's already been two, different approaches that they've taken. There's been, the first approach, which was looking for, short-term recruitment based on experience and needs of the squad. So you look at Pablo Mari being Arteta's first signing, a left-footed centre-back that was, approaching his late 20s, that could just slot into that role. But of course, he got injured, so they had to buy Gabriel a few months later. And then Willian coming in after that. You've got that, the older bunch that they expected to add to the team in terms of not just footballing ability, but guidance as well. But that didn't work out. So now they've already switched to looking towards the future. You look at the signings this summer: Albert Sambi, Lokonga, Nuno Tavares, who's obviously going to be more of a backup to Kieran Tierney, Martin Odegaard, Aaron Ramsdale, and Ben White. They're all between 21 and 23 years old. So you can already see that shift in terms of recruitment, which
they've spent more than any other Premier League club this summer.
Yeah. I think, that as well just shows how, maybe wrong is the wrong word, but I'll just use it for lack of a better word. But
do you know what the thing is? I'm speaking as a neutral. I'm not an Arsenal fan. I'm speaking as a neutral. They make neutrals despair watching them. Even as someone that doesn't support Arsenal, you watch them play, And they make you angry on behalf of people who are watching passionately for Arsenal. Like yesterday, when, I mean, that move down the right-hand side, which was clearly Chelsea's game plan to get Reece James free as the overlapping man, it must have happened 4 or 5 times in the first half. And that is on Arteta. You know, fair enough if he's outwitted in the first stage of the game, then they've got away with it. Why isn't he dealing with that? How isn't he dealing with that? Why aren't the players on the pitch recognising that that's a problem and taking responsibility and saying, if I'm getting sucked in, then I need, was it Saka on that side in front of him? And maybe I need you to drop back and make that a 5 for a little bit just to tide us over. And that wasn't happening. So they lost the game yesterday because of that. I think that was on the manager yesterday, despite what he said about the difference in quality, because ultimately it was a tactical advantage that won that game early on and got Chelsea clear.
Yeah, there's no doubt that Arteta is not blameless in this. It's an unrecognisable team from what we saw in the FA Cup semi-final and final. Although they rode their luck at times in the season they won it in front of empty stadiums, they did play some really good, effective, confident football where everybody knew their roles. What I saw at Brentford on the opening night, which had some significant mitigating circumstances, equally had some fundamental flaws. And I remember just watching on around 70, 80 minutes when Tavares came on for his debut, a left back playing at right back, and by which point Brentford was sort of streaking through Arsenal's midfield. And I just thought, what on earth is going on here? Even a depleted side, they against a promoted side who they should be getting a result against, they just look completely off the pace, the intensity, a bit bedraggled, if truth be told. And I don't know if that smacks of a lack of confidence, of far from ideal preparation, of not fully understanding the instructions, of being wearied by the relentless instructions being given to them by the sidelines, maybe a bit of everything. But if I take it back to Mark's point on the recruitment, and I don't want this to be perceived as a criticism, because most of us are not in a position to know precisely what's going on the inside and all of the factors for and against. But when you look at the successful clubs, they don't tend to have one person running the show, an all-powerful recruitment person. They have a number of people who are trusted and are experienced and are proven. I name all of the clubs in towards the top of the Premier League and even lower down, and many of them on the continent as well. Arsenal, after the departure of Ivan Gazidis, and then the departure of Sven Mislintat, they placed Raul Sanllehi at the head of everything. He had a more commercial background, although he'd been heavily involved in football and had a strong contacts book. He was in charge of everything to do with football. And there was a head coach in Unai Emery to train the team. Raul Sanllehi leaves, Unai Emery leaves, Mikel Arteta comes in, Edu is now technical director. I don't know of any football expertise around him. There's some really top recruitment and analyst people in the background, but very much his junior. He is at the top of that tree with no sounding boards at that level. And he himself has very little experience in European club football. None, actually, before he came to Arsenal, only with the Brazil national team and Corinthians. You know, Richard Garlick has come in from the Premier League. He's got a legal background and he's been heavily involved in all the transfers, contracts, and that side of things. Vinay Venkatesham is a really top bloke, chief executive, and works very much on the business and commercial, the club side. The Cronkies, no football experience on their part. Tim Lewis, the non-executive director, he's a fan of the club and a lawyer, no football experience there. So it's all on the shoulders now of this new regime, Arteta and Edu. Arteta having never been a manager before, never worked specifically in recruitment. And I think that is now being cruelly exposed. And again, I'm not blaming those two individually, but if you look at any rival clubs, if you can call them rivals, they have a far more advanced and comprehensive and robust setup that Arsenal just don't have. And I think that's one of the most significant contributory factors.
What I would say, I suppose, just to be slightly in Arsenal's defence, particularly about this summer's transfer window, is when you finish 8th 2 seasons in a row, it limits what you can do in the transfer market. I think from a wages perspective, more than you can spend on transfer fees, which you have to do. But in terms of wages, they couldn't get, for example, they could never go this summer and get Lukaku, Varane, Sancho. Those players, they're not in that market, I don't think, wages-wise. Correct me if I'm wrong. But if you're not in the Champions League, you can't get those players. So then it becomes, okay, so what do we do? Do we go and get players who are experienced in the Premier League, who are maybe coming towards the end of their career? Well, they tried that with like David Luiz and Willian, and it's not really worked out. So then you start thinking, okay, well, we can't overspend on players who are ready now, but maybe we can start doing these young talented players, and that's what they've done. And where I think Arsenal in a really tricky position is it's really easy to identify problems at the club at the moment. It'd be very hard, if any of us were to sit down now and say, let's make a plan for the next 12 months to make Arsenal successful by May. And I do have sympathy with that. Like, that is going to, whoever you are, whichever manager is there, that's going to take time. But, and this is the but, I've not seen evidence since Mikel Arteta has come in that he is going to be the man that does that for the club.
The Premier League is back, and The Athletic is home to the biggest football podcast network in the world. My podcast with Mark Chapman is becoming The Athletic Football Podcast, and there'll be 3 shows a week on that feed. Then there's the usual Totally Football show with James Richardson, Raphael Honigstein, James Horncastle, and the gang. We also have a range of dedicated club shows featuring the likes of James Pearce, Amy Lawrence, and Phil Hay. Check them out for all the latest transfer news and updates from your team. Michael Cox and Tom Warville will showcase their unrivaled analytics knowledge on the Athletic Tactics podcast, while Adam Hurrey's hilarious football cliches is now going twice a week. You've got all things WSL on the Athletic Women's Football podcast. Take your fantasy football team to a new level with the Athletic FPL podcast, and go further down the English pyramid with the Totally Football League show. So buckle up, as we've got big plans for the new season. Listen to all our shows for free in all the usual places, and ad-free when you subscribe to The Athletic.